Teachers at Reddit, what's the most cringe-worthy thing a student has done in your class? I taught 3rd grade in a deeply rural area. In the whole school, there were maybe 3 kids from underrepresented populations. 2 were African American and were being fostered. Anywho, one of the bright ideas of our admin was that we would all watch Barack Obama's inauguration from beginning to end, because it was a historical moment. Agree on the historical moment. Not so agree on the idea of keeping a room full of elementary school students watching this for hours. We stopped watching, and one of the African American kids starting making rifle motions at Obama and pretending to shoot at the screen. I'm like, what the hell? So I pull the kid out into the hallway and say, that's not funny in any context. Why would you do that? He says, my foster dad tells me that he's a N-word president and that we need to stop him before he destroys this country. Back in 10th grade, a teacher asked how many atoms are there in a block of ice or some shit. Some kid yelled over 9,000 and like nobody else got the joke. It went dead silent for a few seconds and I wanted to kill myself out of cringe. Entirely possible that they understood the joke but found it unfunny. Yay, some of us definitely did. But the fact we were also silent kind of made it worse. Not me, but my wife is a middle school history teacher. She was going over recent African history, teaching the kids about South Sudan, etc. One of the girls in the class asks if she could teach them about Wakanda. Straight-faced, completely serious. Can your wife teach me about Wakanda too? I am one of the cool teachers. Not everything has to be about education, so I told my students to do a project on the history. I teach history on anything they liked. One kid did it on the history of being a brony. He even dresses up as one of the ponies. Gave a 5-minute presentation on the history of being a brony, with references to clopping, and he even passed out samples of his own fanfiction. But I was special and got a packet full of Greek mythology, my fav subject, references in the My Little Pony show. He was a really nice guy. But God Jesus, it took every ounce of my being not to laugh. My teacher was always very sarcastic and didn't have a filter. He would just say whatever was on his mind and people loved him for that. One day I go up to him and ask him if I can't take a quiz that I was absent for. He whips out the Scantron and sarcastically says, I don't like you. I knew he was joking but didn't know how to reply, so I said, yeah, I don't like me either. He immediately started apologizing and says, hey man, I was just joking around when I said that. If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. Pretty sure he spent the rest of the semester thinking that I was deeply depressed. Teach high school. Had to cover the semi-formal one night. Female student. Sweet. Nice. Friendly and all that, wanders up to me as she's coming in. Hey Mr. So-and-so. How do I look? Double quote. That's a trap. No good can come from the following answer. So I say something on the lines of good. Admittedly, she was wearing a skin-tight white miniskirt. Good? I was going for tie. My boyfriend just broke up to me and I am out to make him insanely jealous. Apostrophe. Okay. Good luck with that. Not a teacher but a classmate of ours didn't do his project. I forget exactly what it was. A kind of informational show and tell deal. He improvised. Drew a smiley face on a rock and proceeded to try to explain it and its significance. The teacher stopped him almost as soon as he got started and the whole experience was just cringe-inducing. I took the rock home with me that day as reminder of the cringe. This was me in 4th grade. I had recently watched The Goonies with my dad and was in Spanish, so decided to raise my hand and tell the teacher about the part where he says things that aren't true to the Spanish cleaning lady. But the family has no idea. I spoke loud and clear and said, and it really meant this is where he keeps his sexual torture devices. I still remember it. Not a teacher but a college student. Our teacher frequently tells us about a previous student he had who was a hardcore brony. I do games design, so it's not major surprise, who would frequently watch My Little Pony episodes and Nightcore videos based on MLP. The kid apparently flunked because he spent more time on MLP fanfic than class walk. Not a teacher. But I did once bite one. Small school in which everyone, students and faculty, knew each other pretty well and we all got along. I think this happened in my junior year of high school, grade 11 for the non-USA readers. I sat in the back seat of one row and my best friend sat in the same position in the next row. Mumble was handing out graded papers and, after handing me my paper, reached across my desk to hand my friend his paper. It was right there. So I bit it, her arm. Get your head out of the gutter. Just a friendly nip. Maybe with a chomp noise thrown in. Fortunately, everyone, including the teacher, found it humorous. I am a retired teacher. I taught elementary special ed until a stroke ended my career. The worst things involved students who were ostracized for some reason. Their looks, their dress, personal cleanliness. I tried to help them by talking to the parents, giving the special tutoring. But usually they just had to find their place. It just pained me to see children going through such difficulties. I had a girl in 3rd grade. She was 11. So she was a few years behind her age group. But she tried when I could motivate her. Her parents didn't care and never returned my phone calls. This girl could not keep her hands off of her genitals. She would sit at her desk, doing her work, with one hand in her pants. Of course the other kids made fun. It was a teacher's nightmare. I taught 6th grade for a brief period of time. The stupid dances were always cringy, but it blew my mind how aware they were of outdated memes. What's worst was when they act them out in real life or start drawing them on their homework. For example, kids would go, "Hey look, my face when oobfik do," and then my face when 87 RDW5 Insert cringe laughing. It became drastically worse when they started memeing stuff from Fortnite or Roblox. Really gave me a weird crisis. Like, holy shit, did I create this? Kids have absorbed our meme culture without really understanding what it is. And now it's just a normal part of their life. I'm a teaching assistant. And this was not one of my own students, but this did happen to me at work. I work in the elementary school, which is attached to the middle school, which is where I go to buy lunch because they have a salad bar there. One day, there was a kid probably 11-12 walking down the hall with his friend recording him with a cell phone. He was offering to high-five people, all of whom were looking at him like he was an idiot. When people actually humored him and went to high-five him, he'd yank his hand away at the last minute and do a dab, before running away with his friend in hysterics. I asked them what they were doing. Cell phones are not supposed to be used during school hours, and they informed me that they were on their free period and were trying to record a vlog. I feel bad for a lot of the preteens whose life plans involve becoming YouTubers. Not a teacher, but this was 8th grade and I was in English class. There was this really weird kid who had horrible BO and really greasy hair and extremely overweight. I know I sound really fking judgmental. I'm not. This kid just gave me weird vibes. One day him and a kid who had autism got into an argument. One thing led to another and the kid with bad BO picked up a chair and threw it at him and fell on his ass after doing so. The cringy part was that he just lay there. I just sat there trying not to laugh my ass off. I'm a pre-K teacher's aide, meaning I have all the classroom responsibility of a teacher, without the pile of paperwork and the weekend work of creating lesson plans. Recently I was leading some of my students in a discussion about insects. To open the discussion, I asked who would like to fly, and if they could, where they would fly to. Without a moment of hesitation, a child answered, Walmart. Double quote. I was an aide in a classroom of preschoolers for a long time. My specialty was the 2 special needs disabled children in the class, while the actual teacher worked with the other students, the ones that were not special needs. We had one girl whose mom demanded that she be part of the regular group despite the fact that she was not all there. She'd often sit alone for hours, smiling at nothing with a blank, spacey stare while drooling all over her clothes. Sometimes she'd lie on the floor during playtime and there really wasn't much we could do about it. She never played. One day while she was lying on the floor like normal, She just reached into her pants and started hardcore masturbating. I mean bucking and hiccuping and moaning. She was having a grand old time. I just kind of gawked at her for a moment until the teacher that I was talking to followed my gaze and shouted, "Okay. That's enough lying down on the floor, little missy. Up." And snatched her up off the floor and onto her feet. She was no longer allowed to lie on the floor at all. Oh, another one. Because this happened to me yesterday. I was doing a food Kahoot with my year 8s after a test. The answer was chowder. So they yelled out chowder when the answer came up. I said it's pronounced chowder, French accent. They yelled back it's chowder. So I kept doing it. I guess they never watched The Simpsons because they couldn't understand why I was cracking up. Not a teacher, but one of my friends got too drunk at our summer ball, throwing up everywhere and saying all sorts of embarrassing stuff in front of all of our teachers. The whole thing. He had to be taken home early. He was so ill that he literally had to be driven from the mansion it was in up the driveway to the car park by our head of 6th form. He had to open the window and throw up out of the teacher's car BC he couldn't handle the 30-second car journey. He ended up telling his strict parents it was a mix of food poisoning and mixing drinks. We still love bringing it up with him to laugh about. I was teaching 7th graders, 12-year-olds, first year of high school in Australia, in science. We were doing a practical on solving a problem and what instruments would be best in doing so. They had to filter a blue and grainy mixture, chalk plus copper carbonate solution, from a selection of lab equipment. One group ended up filtering so well. The solution at the end was fairly clear. So one of the stupid kids in the group drinks it thinking it's completed filtered and is water. It was still a copper carbonate solution though, just diluted. Copper carbonate isn't very toxic. But still. What if it was something more dangerous? The most cringe-worthy part is the kid did the same thing again the next year in a different teacher's class, boasting he drank it to his friends in year 7 the year before. It's a little late, I know, but I felt like I had to share it. It's not as bad as some of the others. But here goes. When I was student teaching last year, I taught U.S. government and we were doing a lesson about the Electoral College. During the last part of the lesson, I had my class do a writing assignment where they would write about arguments that support the Electoral College and arguments that go against the Electoral College in the first paragraph and give and support their opinion in the second paragraph. Pretty simple, right? Well, there was this guy who missed class that day, and so the next day I told him to look up the Electoral College in his textbook and look at the PowerPoint that had been shared with him online and do the writing assignment as homework. When he turned it in, it was obvious that he had not used the PowerPoints at all and had no idea what he was talking about. He said that the Electoral College was an actual college, as in university, where people went to learn how to vote. One line sticks out to me as literally saying verbatim, "I think the Electoral College is a good idea because it can educate people so that they don't vote for bad candidates, cough cough Trump." He literally said that. I read that and wanted to throw up in my mouth. Not because of what he said about Trump. I don't care what my students' politics are as long as they are thinking critically, but because of how utterly bad his writing was and how misinformed he was about the voting process. He was a senior in high school and so was near or at voting age. As someone who went to really good private schools growing up, it really brought home the impact that bad schools can have on a kid. I still cringe when I think about it. Not a teacher, but I had a witchcraft class. Throughout one of the lectures on spells rituals, a student kept asking questions such as, "Are there any covens near the university or in the city? What do you have to do to get into a coven? Where can I get bull blood from? Do I have to drink it or can I just bathe in it?" Finally our teacher asked why he was asking all these questions and his response, "Oh. Because I want to make my cousin fall in love with me." Thankfully he never showed up to another class. I teach high school math, pre-calc and calculus. One day I was walking through the classroom and by a table and spied a small piece of paper a student was showing to his friends. This particular paper scrap looked to have rows of small uppercase letters on it, all evenly spaced, not forming words. Very clearly a cheat sheet for a multiple choice exam assignment. I stopped by the table, held out my hand and asked him to give it to me. Kid shoves the paper in his mouth and immediately swallows it and looks super stunned to have been caught. Now this was a fairly trustworthy student who never really got in trouble in my class, so I was taken aback and asked him why he put that in his mouth. Student says up. There was a DCK drawn on it. I almost lost it then. It managed to keep my laughter at bay long enough to advise him that probably wasn't the best way to answer questions about putting things in his mouth in the future or. Not a teacher, but I was the cringy student. In the 4th grade. The class was loud and the teacher was talking to a student behind me. I have this weird urge, I've dialed it down in recent years, to chew on things. Particularly paper. So I put a wad of paper in my mouth and started chewing. Then the teacher looks at me. Comic, do you know what is in your mouth? Double quote. The room suddenly gets quiet as everyone is looking at me. I quickly take it out of my mouth as I hear a boy say in a somewhat whisper it was paper. The teacher asks me if it was gum. I say no. The class goes back to being loud. When they decided it would be funny to put a tampon up their noses like and she's the man. They all kept passing around this tampon and every time I would turn around someone different had this same tampon up their nose. Another time this girl pretended she had cancer so she didn't have to work. I called the mum and she's like, WTF, no she does not have cancer. Also, one of my colleagues told me a story about one of our neighboring schools. A young female teacher had a group of boys stand up once in class and flash their DCKS asking, Miss, do you like our DCKS? She responded by looking closer and saying, where are they, I can't see them. This is only my first term teaching and I swear something crazy happens every day. Makes my job fun. My 1st grade teacher was in her 1st year of teaching. I didn't feel well and asked, can I go to the nurse? She tried to teach me to say may I and responded with I don't know. Can you? Not understanding. I went back to my seat. Few minutes later I went to try again and she was in the middle of the same response as I vomited all over her and we walked down the hall. Me still throwing up in a garbage can. To get to the nurse's office. I didn't understand what I was saying wrong for a few years, but that poor teacher probably never questioned anyone going to the nurse again. We were having the first day icebreakers and when asked what her plans were for life after high school, a student she told the class that she planned to strip at the local titty bar up the street and have babies. Everyone was silent for about 15 seconds and I stated that I hoped she was kidding and she stared at me not saying anything for another 15 seconds, so I changed the subject. I happened to see her out and about with a kid a year or so later, so I know she achieved at least one of her dreams. Not a teacher as it pertains to this, but I am. In fact, a teacher. But once in high school, we were learning a segment on World War II and the Holocaust. We were given extra CR. Obligatory, not a teacher. But as a teacher's aide in senior year, I often sat through a lot of strange conversations. I babysat a room of what I think were 13-14-year-olds, 8th grade-ish. And one of those amazing moments happened where everyone gets quiet right as someone whispers something embarrassing. From the back of the room I hear chattering and jabbering, and then, as everyone stopped talking all at once, a single low voice said, "Let him put it in my butt." Double quote. A group of girls turned to look at me to see if I heard and I pretended to not have, but we made eye contact so they knew. They giggled and the girl who said it was on the verge of tears. I honestly felt kinda bad for the shitty luck she had. No pun intended, I suppose. My mom teaches. One morning during homeroom, student announces to the entire room full of kids that a girl who's a student there, junior high school, is peeing in the bushes outside the classroom. Everyone turns to look out the windows, which make up one entire side of the room. And sure enough, girl is squatting with her pants around her ankles in plain view of around 40 students and my mom. Something about the glare on the glass prevented her from seeing the room was full of people. Entire class bursts into laughter and the girl hears this, realizes she's being watched and quickly pulls up her pants and gets the hell out of there. I'm sure the girl had to hear about that for the rest of her time there. Not a teacher, but I coach high schoolers. One day during practice, the boys find a random pair of panties that a girl had obviously had a period in. I didn't think much about it other than it was pretty weird item to find laying around. We practice at a local park and told them to leave them alone. Weeks later, they resurfaced when I found out they had been passing the pair around by putting them in each other's equipment bags as a joke. I'm a college professor now, but this happened while I was an undergrad. During the first week of class, my Poly 101 class, the professor asked us to each read a book review about one of the books on the required reading list. I forget why, but that's not important. So later that week, when he asks who found a good review, this girl raised her hand and started talking about this review of a seemingly random book. When the professor asked her what book is this a review of, she said, well, I googled the words required reading and found a list of books and this was a review of one of those books. We were all speechless. She didn't realize he was asking us to read about a required book on our own course syllabus.